Budgeting. Assessing change in poultry systems requires a different approach to assessing productivity and production in a system. In economics, this means looking at the marginal impacts, not the overall system. Important factors that can change in poultry systems include feed prices, labor prices, technology such as housing, breeds, feeding systems and harvesting systems, and animal health status. To assess change, we first need to estimate the marginal or additional increases in inputs and outputs. We then need to check the market prices and accessibility for inputs and outputs. Finally, we compare the marginal or additional benefits against the marginal costs. Partial budgeting is a tool used to assess small changes of short duration. It is based on additional costs and additional benefits, and is a practical tool for the application of marginal costs and benefits. It is used for limited time frames, such as one production cycle or 1 year. We can draw a line that represents the relationship between the level of variable inputs and the level of outputs. Each point on this line, in turn, represents a gross margin. As the variable inputs increase, one imagines that the level of outputs also increases. But which of these points is the best? To understand how to assess moving from one point of cost and output, which on the chart are represented by benefits, we need to estimate the additional costs of moving from one point to another, and also the additional benefits. If the additional benefits are greater than the additional costs, then the change can be seen as economically profitable. The relationship between the inputs and outputs is technical. The use of resources, however, is influenced by the price of inputs and the price of outputs. The markets for both inputs and outputs are therefore a critical aspect of assessing change. Let's break this down into simple chunks. A change implies additional costs. These are either new costs or revenue foregone. A change also implies additional benefits. These are costs saved and new revenue. This creates a matrix. It looks simple and is a good way to avoid missing important issues and to avoid double counting. It is important to remember that if you increase production and animals, you will need to estimate the new costs for feed in order to produce the greater quantity of output and the greater number of animals. New costs are those that relate directly to the implementation of an intervention or project. They include vaccines, disinfectants, drugs and medicines, infrastructure such as feed and water systems or housing, and payments to veterinarians and support staff. They also include the time of the farmer and his workers, and, if the number of birds increases due to disease control, the cost of additional feed, forage, and infrastructure. Revenue foregone is the income sacrificed by making a change. It relates to the opportunity cost of the change. Examples of revenue foregone for an animal health intervention are the salvage value of birds with disease that either die or are slaughtered, and the value of products produced from diseased or dead birds, such as eggs from sick birds or feathers from dead birds. Costs saved relate to expenditure that will cease to exist, for example, if a disease is eradicated or controlled. Such costs may have been paid by farmers and the government. In the case of an intervention that reduces prevalence of a disease, the costs saved include the treatments and time needed to care for sick birds. In the case of a change of strategy that ends a vaccination program, the costs saved include the cost of the vaccine and the labor needed for its application. New revenue is the extra income generated by a poultry health intervention that changes the poultry health status. Examples of new revenue include the greater number of birds produced, the higher level of product produced, or an increase in the price of birds or products as a result of their sale in markets that give better prices. When estimating new revenue, remember that extra birds and products need feed and infrastructure. These costs need to be added to the new costs. Let us now look at a practical example. A smallholder farmer has a unit with enough space to raise 200 broilers per batch. The farmer normally buys 250 day-old chicks, expecting to lose 50 of them in the first 21 days. An improvement in the management of nutrition and health in the early period of life is predicted to reduce the mortality by a half. The farmer is interested in this change, but is unsure whether it would be worthwhile. You are asked to carry out an economic analysis to examine the economic profitability of the change. You are given the following information. The cost of the additional nutrition is 12 cents per bird. The cost of the additional medication is 5 cents per bird. A day-old chick costs $2.25. A finished bird price is $3 before the change and $3.35 after the change. The change requires spending an extra 3 days in the unit. The farmer would normally work for a local business during these days, for which he receives $7.50 per day. The feed cost per bird from day 21 until finishing weight is $1.25. This table is a partial budget analysis. It compares the additional costs and benefits of the change. There are 3 new cost items: nutrition, health, and potentially additional feed. There is 1 revenue foregone item, the sale of labor to the neighboring business. For the additional benefits, there are costs saved with the need to buy less day-old chicks, and new revenue with a better price for the day-old chicks. Overall, the additional benefits are greater than the additional costs by $65.50. This change can be said to be economically profitable. An important aspect of looking at disease in a poultry system is to assess the overall impact. This is made up of 2 main components. Direct losses relate to the loss of animals, the reduced quality of animals, and changes in flock structure due to fertility problems. They can also include impacts on human health if the disease affects humans. Indirect losses relate to the additional costs of surveillance, control, and prevention, as well as the loss of revenue through denied access to markets or the suboptimal use of technologies. The more we spend on surveillance, control, and prevention, the less the direct impacts. Decisions on animal health are often based on trade-offs between the costs of control and the benefits from avoiding direct impacts. Economic theories and tools are valuable here in assessing when a change may be useful. According to economic logic, if the avoidable losses are greater than the costs of a change in disease status, the investment is worthwhile. This presentation about budgeting is part 5 of a 5-part series on the economics of family poultry production.